What's going on, guys? Today we're going to be reviewing Sean O'Malley versus Petr Yan, fight that happened last weekend. It's been a very controversial decision, and I'm going to be giving my opinion and my take on whether Sean O'Malley actually won the fight or whether it was a bad decision. So a few things to keep in mind with me watching this. So I'm going to be watching one round at a time and breaking it down. Just my thoughts. I'll add a couple clips in here. And first thing that I want to mention is that I'm a huge Sean O'Malley fan. I've been watching him since I was probably 15 years old. He is the reason that I started eating healthy. He's the reason I changed my lifestyle and really went full on focus into fighting as much as I did. And in saying that, I am also a Muay Thai fighter. I'm a kickboxer. I've got a little bit of knowledge in MMA, a little bit of knowledge in Jiu-Jitsu, but it's not my forte. But one thing that I do know is that damage is the main scoring factor in MMA. And without further ado, let's get into the first round. And one more thing that I want to mention is that watching the fight live, I did think Petr Yan won. I thought he had the second and the third round. First round going to Sean O'Malley, which is a bit of a controversial take, but this is the way I saw it watching it in the moment. But I've rewatched it a couple of times and my opinions changed a little bit, so let's get into the first round. Alrighty, first round. So Sean did a great job of keeping his range. He did a great lead leg side kick to Petr Yan's leg. He'd throw some good leg kicks, he'd throw the hands and always lean back and just get out of the way of Peter's shots, which Sean O'Malley is really good at using his distance and his range to his advantage. And against someone like Petr Yan, who's so much smaller than him, that was probably the best thing he could have done. Another thing is that Sean O'Malley was moving back a lot in this round. He was the one on the back foot, but Petr Yan wasn't really landing that much compared to Sean. Sean was touching him, he was hitting him, even though he was on the back foot. There was one time before that Peter took him down, he landed a good left hand, but it hit the glove. And even in those small gloves, that will give you a little bit of a stun. I've been hitting those little gloves. It's not a fun time. So, yeah, I would have to give this round to Sean O'Malley because of the activity. He hit Petr Yan more. He hurt him. I wouldn't say he hurt him bad, but you can tell there were times where Peter was stunned. He didn't want to do too much. Like at probably the last 20 seconds of the round, Sean hit him with a nice uppercut, getting through the guard, just find those little holes in those little gloves. And that's what you got to do in a fight like this. And one thing that no one is mentioning, they didn't even put it on the stats, Sean took him down in the last 20 seconds of that round. And even though he didn't do anything with it, Peter didn't really do anything with his takedown either. Even though he took Sean O'Malley down, Sean was throwing up armbar attempts. He was throwing up submissions on his back. He was being the more aggressive fighter. And because of that, I've got to give this round to Sean O'Malley. Alrighty, round number two. Round number two started off quite competitive. Sean landed a good left hand, and I actually think he dropped Peter. You know, the definition of a knockdown is if you hit someone and their glove touches the ground, which is exactly what Sean did. And he was following up, and I think he might have got a little bit too desperate for that knockout. And when you get a little bit too desperate for a knockout, you can overexert yourself. And Peter hit him with a good left hand that Sean just didn't see coming. I'm not sure if he knocked him down. You couldn't really see it in the replay. You couldn't see it because of the camera angle. But then Sean was taken down by Peter. And from there, it was a little bit downhill for Sean. It wasn't much of a competitive fight other than that. And after Peter took Sean down, Sean was throwing up submission attempts, but it wasn't really doing much. Peter was landing the bigger shots. So those submission attempts that Sean was throwing up wasn't really doing a whole lot. And then after they got up, Peter landed a beautiful sweep on Sean, which after Sean got up, he tried to do the same thing, which is just one of those situations. It's monkey see, monkey do. Someone lands something on you, sometimes you want to hit them back. You see it all the time in fights. Someone lands a right kick on someone. If they're a southpaw, they'll land a left kick back. Someone throws a punch, they'll throw a punch back. Even Peter did it earlier in the fight with the left hand situation, knocking Sean down, which is a good thing sometimes, but sometimes if you've got someone with a higher IQ, they can read it. And after this, Petr Yan was landing beautiful body kicks on Sean. He'd cut off the cage. Every time Sean would move, he'd get kicked whatever way he was going, and that's the perfect way to set up body kicks. You could tell it was affecting Sean. His palms were coming down. He was breathing heavy. And this round really wasn't that competitive. I remember hearing in Sean's podcast, he said that it was competitive, more competitive than people thought. I think Yan had about 3.5 minutes of control time, and that's just not a competitive round. He got possibly knocked down. But yeah, it was just one of those rounds where it's not competitive, and Sean got taken down at the end of the round and got significant ground and pound landed on him. He was trying to throw up submissions, but just couldn't really land anything. And yeah, I'm giving this round to Petr Yan. Could have possibly been a 10-8 round. It was a pretty dominant round, but you got to go for a 10-9 in my opinion, because Sean did knock him down with that left hand, and yeah, that round was all Petr Yan. So in the third round, Sean was a lot better at avoiding the body kicks. He'd move away from the body kicks rather than leaning into them. He moved a lot better. He'd hit Yan and then move around his body. He was a lot better at his movement. And then he landed a big left knee, which opened up Petr Yan just on the eyebrow. And that was a big moment for him. He come forward, he landed some good shots. Yan also landed some good shots, but I think Sean had this. If you land a cut, it counts as a heavier strike. So that counts as more damage than what it normally was. And remember, the damage is the number one scoring thing in MMA. And after that, Sean landed a big head kick on Yan. It hits Yan's glove, but even those little gloves, if you take a shot like that, it's still going to hurt you. So Yan ended up resulting to wrestling. He ended up taking Sean down, and he had a little bit of control time, maybe about 40 seconds of control time. Sean got up, but he was breathing heavy, and he was still landing shots. He was landing that jab, just that little jab in Peter's face. You know, Sean's got all that range on him, just touching him with the jab. That's just going to be one thing that's going to keep scoring points, and that's all going to add up at the end of the day. And then Petr Yan landed a few good shots. They both threw some big swings and big misses, and then Petr Yan landed a really nice overhand. Could have hurt Sean, but it didn't look overly significant in the moment. And last 20 seconds of the round, Sean tries to take down Peter, but gets taken down himself. This is actually what I thought won Peter the round when I first watched the fight, but rewatching it, I don't think that's the case. And Peter postured up. He didn't do anything with it, but he tried to land a few significant strikes, but couldn't really land anything as Sean was pushing him away with his legs, and the shots were just bouncing off the gloves. Now, another thing that I've seen a lot of people say is that Sean won the fight because he did better than what people thought he would have done. That's a stupid reason to score a fight for someone, in my opinion. You shouldn't be giving someone a fight just because they did better, even if they get absolutely belted, but they landed more shots or something happened. You know, it's just a bad way to think about it. I thought that Sean O'Malley won this fight. It was a razor close decision, but just remember, this is just my opinion. This is just what I saw in the fight. I've watched the fight maybe about 5 times now, and every way I see it slightly different every single time. It was a great fight. Sean got the win. Sean got the best possible outcome leading into his career. Petr Yan is not happy about the decision. He's been talking about leaving the UFC now. And, you know, it's just one of those tough spots. You know, his last fight against Aljamain Sterling, I thought Aljamain won. Same thing in the first round. You know, Aljamain was leaning back a lot on the back foot, but he was landing a lot more shots than Petr Yan. In my opinion, that means Aljamain should be winning the round because he's landing more. Just because you're moving forward does not mean you're winning the fight. It's about activity, it's about damage, and that's why I give the fight to Sean O'Malley. So thank you guys for watching, and just remember, this is just my opinion. Everyone's got an opinion. Everyone I've spoken to has seen this fight differently. It's a 50-50 split, but Sean O'Malley got the best possible outcome because now everyone's talking about him. He was the number one topic coming out of the pay-per-view, and he got another win. He beat the number one ranked guy, and now he's ranked number one, and his next fight is probably going to be for the title. So it's going to be good to see how Sean goes up against someone as high level as Aljamain Sterling, as big as Aljamain Sterling. It's going to be a tough fight. I don't know who'd win that fight at this moment, but I guess we'll have to see when the time comes.